Welcome, listeners, viewers, and online guests, to our next session in our series of Safe to Trade presentations. I'm your host, Kelvin Wood. I'm a consultant environmental health practitioner here at Safe to Trade. And over the coming months, we have a very special programme of topics and updates to provide you all you need to know about the scheme. We hope you enjoy these sessions, and thank you for those joining us today in our virtual forum. After our little chat this morning, you will have the opportunity to ask some questions in a Q&A. So have a think about what it is you'd like to ask and just pop your question in the chat pane, and we'll get through as many of them as we can at the end of the session. So speaking of guests, I've got two very special guests joining us today. We have Clare Lycett, Senior Practitioner in Environmental Health at Milton Keynes Council. And we've got Stuart Wiggans, the Operations Director at Shield Safety, a certification body for Safe to Trade. So good morning to you both. Thank you for joining us today. Clare, can you tell us the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so obviously I'm from Milton Keynes City Council and we're in a primary authority partnership with Shield. I've been an officer for over 25 years, working mostly with commercial premises, and I'm also the main contact for Shield, who we have been working with for 8 years now, the partnership.
Wonderful. Thank you, Clare. And over to you, Stuart. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Stuart Wiggans. I'm a chartered environmental health practitioner. I'm also a fellow of the CIH. I've worked with Shield Safety now for 18 months, and I lead their audit program, safe consultancy, training, advice line, and fire safety as well. Historically, I've worked within the world of retail, so I spent over 20 years at Tesco's, Asda, and also working globally with Walmart. And historically, I'm also a regulator, so I worked in as an environmental health practitioner in local government as well.
Thank you. So this morning, we're going to move our theme on. Last month, we did a little bit of an introduction to Safe to Trade and what it is. Today, we're going to discuss the primary authority relationship a little bit more, the interaction with Safe to Trade as a voluntary third-party assurance scheme, and also the auditing aspect as well. So starting off with yourself, Clare, can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about how Milton Keynes got involved with Safe to Trade? Because it's a little different than the run-of-the-mill partnership, is it not?
Yes, it is. So we do have other coordinated partnerships with third-party organisations. But as I say, with Shield, we've been working on, first there was the Safe to Trade scheme for COVID, and then obviously we've been working on this scheme, which is about food safety primarily. And we have been working obviously with Shield, who have a set of, registered CIEH professional body officers. So when we've all got the same goal in terms of businesses being compliant, and Safe to Trade is a way that but businesses can show that they are compliant. Safe to Trade delivers a consistent inspection throughout the audit set through training, and it's driving up and maintaining operational standards. My colleague Alison Hunt and I have worked through the requirements to issue assured advice on the Safe to Trade standard and the audit set. And the audit set and the standard covers the requirements, and it sort of mimics an officer's inspection.
Wonderful, thank you. And you mentioned your colleague Alison there as well.
Yes.
We mentioned in last month's presentation that this is more than just a food safety inspection,
Yes,
because it does
absolutely.
cover food standards as well. Tell us a little bit about what Alison's
Yes,
provided.
absolutely. So what we've literally done is we've been through the standard, and we've been through the set of the audit questions to make sure that they cover everything that all of the requirements of 852, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and also some of the food standards questions. So from a trading standards point of view, and obviously if you've got unitary authorities out there who are doing dual inspections, it covers the areas that you would generally expect um, to cover.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then speaking of the audit, so Stuart, we mentioned that the key to becoming registered and approved as safe to trade starts with this audit to demonstrate that the standard has been implemented. Can you tell us a little bit about the audit side of safe to trade, Stuart, and kind of how a safe to trade audit is different than the run of the mill food safety audit that people like Shield provide to their customers?
Yeah, so thanks, Kelvin. What I'd firstly say is that the safe trade audit set is probably the most robust audit set I've worked with. As Claire's already touched on, it looks at food safety, it looks at food hygiene, it also looks at food standards. So it's all encompassing from a food business perspective, which I think is really important for business and also for regulators. The key thing is to meet the legislative requirements. It splits the audit set into two different parts. So one is legal requirements, and the second is best practice. And the main thing is that to actually become certified as safe to trade, you've got to meet all of the legal requirements. Otherwise, you don't get onto the scheme itself. So to meet the legal requirements, you either demonstrate those as part of the audit on the day, and the auditor will deem that the business has met its expectation for legal requirements and all the criteria there. Or if the company hasn't met the legal requirements, what can then happen is over a period of time, they can do a thing called evidence verification and actually then submit the findings and an action plan to close out any non-conformances. Now, what's unique about the audit set is that this is then validated by an environmental health practitioner essentially within Shield, and we then deem whether it's meeting the legal standard or not meeting the legal standard. The other couple of things as well about the audit set is that it's got assured advice, which Claire's already touched on, which again provides reassurance to business and to regulators. And the final thing, to make sure that the standard is being maintained. What we're doing is within Shield at this moment in time, and part of the certification body requirement is for us to achieve ISO 17065. So this is the standard for assessment and certification. And it's very similar to things like the Lion Mark standard or the Red Tractor scheme. So that then provides reassurance, not only to the regulatory community, but also to businesses that it is meeting a very high caliber in relation to the audit set itself.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stuart. And Claire, when you were mentioning about the kind of the mapping exercises that were undertaken on the audit criteria to 852, you're actually a representative member on the Technical Standards Committee as well, aren't you? So kind of how does, what exercises did we go through during that mapping? Obviously, there's a lot more to 852.
So there has been so much work on this to ensure that it is correct. And what we've done is, I say, we originally went through every point on the audit in terms of where it fitted in, and to make sure that 852 in particular was covered. We followed it all the way through from the codex and the requirements through to 852, and also the changes or differences within the devolved nations. And we have checked and double checked, and we have been sort of overseeing every tweak possible. The spreadsheets, etc., involved have been astronomical. There's been so much work gone into this just to make sure that it is spot on, because obviously, as a regulator myself, I need to be assured when I'm giving you assured advice that we have covered everything, that this is a consistent inspection for businesses, covering all of the points. So it isn't just sort of the amount of time you've got, or sort of just focusing in on one section, etc. This is making sure that the whole list is comprehensive. And then as part of the technical committee, we discuss every point. So even though we've been through it and we've all put our penny's worth in to make sure that it is correct and the scope is correct, etc. So we've sat down so many times and discussed it to make sure that it is right, that we have the legal requirements and any best practice, and that it is quite clearly stated, so that businesses, when they look at the standard that they need to follow, are clear, and that they are going to be able to show that they are complying with the law, that their due diligence will be so good if they're following this. It's the most comprehensive set I've ever seen, I have to say, and I echo what Stuart's just said. And I say, from our point of view, we do have confidence in its delivery because our peers are delivering this out there in the field, and they're also being monitored within Shield. And of course, we are reviewing the processes. So we also review all of those processes to make sure that they are tight and fair, and that they're providing consistency, and that consistency is maintained.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. And just as a little sneak peek, we do actually have the chair of the Technical Standards Committee, Alex Kyriakides, on next month's session. So just a little spoiler for you there. So talking about kind of customers and subscribers to the scheme, Stuart, how has this message landed? Obviously, we've talked up the standard, the criteria. We know it's great. But I know a lot of certainly larger enterprise customers do like a more bespoke solution. They're used to having things done their way. So how has Safe to Trade been landed with them and received?
Yeah, and what I'd say is that this is a journey both for businesses and also for Shield on how we can move onto the Safe to Trade audit set. So, traditionally, as you touched on, a lot of businesses have gone for bespoke audits, and that allows them to understand about their own business, which is fantastic, and it allows them to continuously improve what is happening within their own business. I suppose where Safe to Trade is different, it goes back to what we said about, and Claire's touched on this several times, about consistency, about uniformity. It covers food safety, it covers hygiene, it covers standards. What it also then allows the business to do is not only compare each of their sites on audit to audit, but also audit round to audit round. They can do a comparison. You can also do comparisons with other similar sorts of businesses as well, which I think will be really important to understand where businesses are in the in their journey to meet the legal requirements. I think what you find as well is those businesses that are early adopters, and the challenge is that someone's always going to be first to come on board to embrace the program. But the benefits that these businesses have seen, not only with the robust audit set that has been developed, but also the meeting the legal requirements, the evidence verification, and also the assured advice is really reassuring for those businesses. What it allows us, though, to do with the comparison across different businesses is look into non-conformance compliance. And what we can do and share with regulators as well as businesses themselves is where those key opportunities are for businesses. So just for example, the top 3 non-conformities that we're finding at the moment as part of the audits are cleanliness and hygiene, date coding and labelling, and the third big thing being pest control. So that's great for us to share that with our businesses, because then they can make their programs more robust in relation to those areas. They can look at their policy and procedures. As a regulator, with my regulatory hat on, I'd be able to go, actually, I know where the key focuses are when I'm going into these businesses, and especially those businesses that signed up to Safe to Trade. They are the well-intended and well-informed businesses. They want to do the right thing. They're aspiring to be the best at what they do, hence the reason why they're embracing the Safe to Trade standard. I think this is where we then look at how we can share all this data with the regulators ultimately, and if that can help drive the focus from a regulatory perspective. We all know that regulators are going through financial constraints and resource constraints at this moment in time. And I think the reassurance that Safe to Trade can provide to a regulator is it can help them with their informed local decisions on where to go and focus their resources. So is this about going out to the well-intended, well-informed businesses and doing full visits in those places? Or is it about trying to focus on targeted areas within the Safe to Trade sort of focus visit, and then also allowing regulators to focus on the high risk, the persistent offenders and the rogue traders? So the ones that, as a regulator years ago, they're the ones I really like to get my teeth into, and also support those new businesses that are coming on board who do need that help and support from the regulatory community, which as regulators, we also do a fantastic job helping those businesses embrace the commercial aspects.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stuart. It's interesting because if you think of traditional audits with, say, a pass mark, this robust, and I think we've all used the word comprehensive so far this morning, the requirement aspects of Safe to Trade and the requirement to close off your actions, which is evidence-based. So you're mitigating the risk to zero, is like unheard of in regular world of auditing. So we've discussed the audits. We're all very, very satisfied at the robustness of it. What about the people delivering the service for the certification body, Stuart? Can you tell us a little bit about the competency requirements of the auditors? As I'm sure the regulatory community would be very interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, so as both Claire and I have mentioned, we do utilise environmental health practitioners to deliver the Safe to Trade programme. And that is definitely one of the things that Shield has embraced. We are the biggest provider of EHPs in the UK. And, this is one thing that we really embrace from our graduate programmes all the way through to the pathway and supporting those through the chartered journey. Now, it isn't always a criteria just to be an EHP. You may have someone who's met the requirements of the Food Standards Agency or Food Standards Scotland. So as long as you can meet the competency requirements of the national regulatory bodies, then you can be deemed initially competent to do Safe to Trade. But that's on the first hurdle that you need to go through. So secondly, you've got some online training that needs to be completed. That covers safety, hygiene and standards. And to tell you the truth, the one that I was challenged with personally most was the trading standards aspect. That's not an area of my expertise. Thankfully, I did pass in the end. But I'm sure that's probably those from the environmental health background, that the one that is the bigger challenge for us all that's out there. But I think that just again shows the robustness of what we're doing. So once you've done the initial learnings and sort of training, then it's about going out and doing a visit. So as part of the visit, what you have is then a shadow visit by someone who is deemed competent and signed off to be competent. They will then go and shadow the auditor to make sure that they are picking up the legal requirements as well as best practice as part of this audit process. And if the individual meets those requirements, then they will be signed off and free to go and do Safe to Trade all over the country, which I think is fantastic. Yeah. But it doesn't just stop there. Then we've got a quality assurance program that's in place. So as part of the QA process, the audit reports are reviewed, making sure, again, that legal requirements are legal requirements and not falling into best practice and vice versa. Now, what then happens on the back of this is that we then share any of these findings with the Safe to Trade scheme, who's the owner of the overall Safe to Trade programme. We share that with the Independence Governance Board, which supports governance of the whole programme. And what we do is we then ensure that we can demonstrate the competence of our individuals, the training and the QA process as well, which is really, really robust across the board. And I suppose the key thing is, as an EHP, we all love a bit of CPD, hence the reason why, part of the reason why we're also on this call. We will be looking into rolling this training out to regulators as well, because I think it's really important to understand what the requirements are of the scheme and also to challenge ourselves on new learnings. As Claire touched about unitary authorities before, and that ability to go and do standards as well as safety and hygiene. But that isn't for everyone. So the trading standards aspects will be a challenge for a few of us, but always an opportunity to learn. Every day's a school day, Kelvin.
Indeed. Making yourself vulnerable on camera there, Stuart. I thought you were going to say you'd failed it for a moment.
No, I didn't fail. I was close.
And talking about stakeholder engagement, we mentioned on last month's session as well that we are reaching out to the enforcement community and to regulators to have your voice heard and contribute to Safe to Trade through the stakeholder engagement forum. So we put information online last month about how you can get involved there. So just take a look at last month's session if you want to hear more about that. So we've mentioned earlier about this aspect of evidence verification. So in order to be approved on the register, all of the legal requirements of the Safe to Trade standard must be met. So undoubtedly, or probability-wise, that an audit is going to find that some of the requirements need some action. The report is published and then the evidence verification process begins. So I imagine that's got some timescales to adopt. And tell us a little bit about that process, please, Stuart.
Yeah, so as we've already touched on, that this is about legal requirements and best practice, and part of the criteria is making sure that the branches, the sites, the locations that we check across the UK are meeting the legal requirements. Now, the legal requirements will be picked up on the day, and hopefully those businesses will have already demonstrated that they are meeting those legal requirements. But if they unfortunately don't on that occasion, what happens is the businesses have a chance to then put an action plan in place, and that action plan then needs to demonstrate that they can close out that non-conformance. And it's only once the non-conformance is actually fully closed out that there will these sites will be eligible to join the Safe to Trade scheme. So if you're a new business coming onto the scheme, you've got 90 days to close out the non-conformances. If you're an existing site that's on the scheme, then you've got 30 days to close out the non-conformances. Now, this doesn't undermine anything as part of the scheme, having 30 days or 90 days, because at the end of it, you can't get onto the scheme until you've actually fully closed out all of those legal requirements. And the evidence verification is completed by an environmental health practitioner who's based within Shield, and they make sure that they are fully confident that suitable and sufficient evidence has been provided by the business to close out that action. And to put it into context, about 40% of the actions that are coming through for evidence verification get signed off on the first occasion, which is fantastic. But that also shows that 60% don't. And the robustness is that over time, we'll then make sure that we support those businesses by doing that evidence verification to ensure they can go into the scheme and ensure that that scheme is meeting the standard that as regulators, as businesses and consumers, we're all expecting.
Wonderful, thank you. So from an impartiality perspective, the evidence verification, that's a desktop activity, and is that undertaken by a different person than the original auditor?
Yeah, you touched on impartiality there, Kelvin. So there's a couple of things on impartiality. One, we do impartiality training for our team to ensure that there is that there is nothing that could be untoward when someone does either the audit, the QA, or the evidence verification. We've got to have separate teams doing these checks, because otherwise you'd be checking the checker of the checker, which is not a robust process and wouldn't meet some of the ISO standards that I touched on earlier on for the ISO 17065. So it is really important to make sure that there is that independence there. And again, we report as part of the process that once someone's gone through all of this, as a certification body, Shield can then certify that that business has met the requirements, but it's only once all of those legal requirements have been closed down.
Wonderful. And I'm sure there's a few people there tapping away at the keyboards with questions in order to kind of build trust. The evidence that is kind of submitted through software, how do we trust that? What kind of evidence is it? Do people just write on that, yes, I've closed that? How is it validated?
I'm sure we've all seen that either through audit eyes or through regulatory eyes, where you'll see the response closed. And that would not be deemed as suitable and sufficient from our perspective. So it would be everything. If there was a defective wall, for example, and that was identified as part of the legal requirement because of the potential for contamination of food products, and the requirement was for that wall to be repaired or replaced, then the evidence that would come through would not only be information coming through from the builder to say this is the work that's been pitched for, the work has been. It's more about though once the work has been completed, because we need that evidence verification. What I don't want though is the builders say, yes, Kelvin, it's all completed, and then you just put that word. What you need then is that physical evidence verification, so a photograph confirming the location of the issue and ensuring that it can be deemed suitable and sufficient. So again, it will provide that level of reassurance that the risk has been reduced to as low as reasonably practicable.
Wonderful. So no offense to any builders on the call, but we're looking for photographs of completion of works. If it's documentation checks, it might be submission of a training record, an updated procedure, though, like real evidence rather than just a say-so.
That's great.
Thank you. Okay, so we have our standard, we have our audits demonstrating that the standard's been implemented, the evidence has been verified, and people are now approved on Safe to Trade with the fabulous door stickers and standards. So when we look at kind of ongoing governance and making sure people are continually safe to trade, how do we kind of demonstrate that we are looking for anything that might cause any concern or bring the scheme into disrepute, dare I say. So kind of, are there any examples of interventions coming to you firstly, Clare, from obviously from a food hygiene rating perspective to start with? In England, you've got to be a 3 or above, and in Scotland, you've got to be a pass on the information scheme. So tell us about the kind of any downgrade investigation that we might do.
Right. So obviously, to be on the scheme, a business has got to be a 3 or more. And therefore, if it is below a 3, or in Scotland, improvement required, it's the responsibility of the business to let Safe to Trade know. And that's actually documented in the agreement. They have to notify that, or they will have to notify any other issues that there's been any negative publicity about. Perhaps there's been a sighting of a mouse, or an officer's gone in for a food complaint, etc. They have to report that through to Safe to Trade. And then that triggers a downgrade and an investigation until they're officially re-rated back up to a 3 or higher. The business is removed from the business register that we hold as the Primary Authority Regulated Business Group, and we keep a constant eye on that, and it'll be amended. Now, at the moment, there's Shield has more than one tool that we have got assured advice on, and therefore we're making sure that the register clearly details those who have a Safe to Trade membership and have passed on the scheme, so it'll be easy to find them. And we want officers to be able to utilise this information so that when they are considering their programme of inspections, and if they can see that a business has got this certification, I think that they can come to us, and we can let them know, we can tell them how what the due diligence looks like when they've been audited, etc. We can give them additional information, because this is more of a real-time I won't say real-time inspection, but it's an annual inspection, so it's a lot more frequent than most inspections out there. And we know that premises change, etc. all the time, and therefore that's why we've got this downgrading system, so that if anything does happen, that that certification is removed for that period of time while it's investigated.
Interesting. So the downgrade investigation, the business would go in review, and then it would be the business to demonstrate that actions have been completed, and the ultimate kind of getting yourself back on the register would be once you've been officially re-rated and you are a 3 or higher or a pass in Scotland. So the initial requirements to get on still stand.
Absolutely. It's working in conjunction with the local authorities, so that the businesses are supported. We can show local authorities who has who has this due diligence, so to speak, shall we say, or has been at least audited and inspected in line with this programme, which I have to say is incredibly robust. And then I think it's about supporting the businesses, and businesses that are on this are have had to work very hard to make sure that they have passed this, because it is, as I said, every single point on that standard.
Absolutely. And again, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, to kind of put a voice to the community on the call there, not every business might be hugely proactive in telling the certification body that they've had a bad inspection, or, let's just say they forget rather than any kind of ill will. Are there any other kind of checks and balances or mechanisms available for the certification body to kind of catch those? Maybe, I don't know, do you know anything about that, Stuart?
Well, I'll let Clare go first.
Go on, Clare.
All I was going to say was, obviously, if a local authority have been out to a premises and they know it's on Safe to Trade, they can come and email me. Obviously, information is on the register. Let me know, and then we can investigate. So we can investigate. I can pass this on to Shield and Safe to Trade, and we can look at that and work out what is happening there, because we don't want any business bringing this into disrepute. Okay, this is something that we're very keen to make sure that we're all working together on, and keeping the register live and informed.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we're doing from a business perspective is actually reviewing the data. Any of us can go onto Google at this moment in time and make informed decisions on where we want to eat. And so by us reviewing the food hygiene ratings or food hygiene information sort of scores from a Scottish perspective, we know any of those businesses that are less than a 3 or come up with improvement required, and that would also trigger the other mechanisms. So if an individual does fail to notify us, Kelvin, and the route that Claire's already flagged doesn't flag any businesses that aren't meeting required standards, then we've also got the other route via the Google searches. We also have other mechanisms though, and you talked about disreputes. Disrepute could be several things that could come through here. So we also look at customer complaints that would come through, and potentially a bit like TripAdvisor. People do feedback regularly on places that they eat, as well as sites that they go and visit. But what we have within Safe to Trade is probably TripAdvisor with a bit of a twist. And we talked about evidence verification before. Claire's talked about that as part of the action plans, etc. So where we believe that there is sufficient information coming through from consumers about a premises that's on Safe to Trade, it's achieved its certification and it isn't meeting the required standard, then we can work with those businesses. We can put them in review, very similar to how we would do for lower rated premises, and then expect the businesses to actually put an action plan in place. And again, that would be then reviewed by a competent environmental health practitioner to ensure that it is meeting the relevant requirements and closed off appropriately.
So that's actually on the register, isn't it? You would search for your business and then click them, and there's the opportunity there and then to rate the business and give feedback, which is open text. You can write chapter and verse, or if you just want to rank someone from terrible to tremendous, there's a Likert scale there for that, and you can drill down to actual individual aspects, can you, about the standard of hygiene in front of house, what the toilets were like, etc. So it is collecting a lot of data, and I'm right in believing there's an algorithm that takes place to flag consistently low rated businesses to trigger this investigation, is it not, Stuart?
Yeah, and I think that's and what you touched on there is that for those businesses that want to go down the Safe to Trade route, which is obviously a really robust standard and demonstrating that they're meeting the legal requirements, ultimately this is a consumer standard. This is what is right for the customer who's out there, and this should actually start providing them with a lot more reassurance. If there is anything that's untoward that's coming through and the customers are feeling disgruntled and it's not meeting the requirements that they would be reasonably expecting, that's why we would be doing these sorts of reviews. So it is an important part of the process. It's also part of the governance process as well, because these things would also be referred through to the Safe to Trade Independence Governance Board when we have premises in review or potentially going to be removed from the scheme. So for businesses who want to sign up for Safe to Trade, the risk is probably just as great to lose Safe to Trade as it is to gain Safe to Trade. So once you've got Safe to Trade, you're not going to want to lose it. You're going to want to maintain the standards because, as I mentioned earlier, these are the well-intended, well-informed businesses. They want to do the right thing. And that, I think, is crucial to maintain the standard in the right way. Yeah,
and just to kind of weed out those, there are those malicious kind of bits of feedback that go through on any kind of TripAdvisor, as you just mentioned, Stuart. So there is always this right to reply aspect from the food business operator that feeds into the investigation and is posted and hosted on behalf of Safe to Trade, so that it isn't just reams and reams of kind of malicious content, just to build trust in the scheme there. Thank you. Okay, so I think we've had quite a holistic view there of the audit side of Safe to Trade, primary authority involvement in the development and running of the scheme. So at this point in time, I would like to now open the opportunity for any of our online guests to ask any questions. So first of all, thank you, Claire, thank you, Stuart, for joining us today. And let's see if we have any questions coming through. So we're still a little light on the questions, so now we need some nice incidental music to listen to, maybe, while we wait. We do have some members of our production team just scanning the chat panel with us as well there. So we've got a question from Helen Atkinson. Thank you, Helen. And it says, my main question before I came on this webinar was about the effectiveness of the Safe to Trade scheme in relation to consumer information and ensuring that the consumer can inform decision about purchasing food or eating out. Considering that the well-established food hygiene rating scheme goes some way into achieving this, how does Safe to Trade fit in or complement this? Since listening to the webinar up to now, am I correct in assuming that Safe to Trade is a tool for businesses to prove to enforcement authorities that they are compliant rather than a mechanism to inform the consumer? So that's a great question, Helen. Thank you very much. And I think there's two questions to answer there. So first of all, let's unpick the side that we said about the information to consumers about making an informed decision. We mentioned earlier about the food standards aspect, but I don't think we've laboured in this webinar yet about the allergen information or content of Safe to Trade. So, you know, what information is provided through Safe to Trade for consumers to make that informed choice? Who wants to take that one?
Where's Stuart gone?
Yeah, I mean,
So yeah,
go on, Claire, go on.
No, you go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, so obviously the standard itself looks at safety, hygiene, and food standards, as we've obviously mentioned, and it is a consumer standard. This is the idea behind the Safe to Trade is to inform consumers, and as we're all aware, and Kelvin, you've touched on allergens and allergen awareness, and as we've known over the last few years, there's been a lot of sad instances where allergens have unfortunately led to some serious illness and, if not death. And the idea behind the Safe to Trade standard is actually to help inform consumers that these businesses are meeting the legal requirements across the board. It does complement the food hygiene ratings as well as the FHIS. This is not a replacement for regulatory visits from the enforcement community. This is, I think, as Claire touched on earlier on, we're actually on, despite us being on different sides of the fence, we're actually got the same ultimate goal, which is about protecting consumers. And that's the crucial bit for me, is how we can try and drive the standard forward with our regulatory hats on, with our business hats on, and our consumer hats on, to ensure that it's a win for consumers, it's a win for business, and it's ultimately a win for regulators as well. So this will really drive the standards, and what ultimately should happen is you'll get businesses going, actually, I want to be in that camp over there. I want to be in the Safe to Trade camp, because as part of the informed choices that consumers will be making, they'll be going to businesses that are demonstrating a higher level of business legal requirements through the Safe to Trade scheme, which is an informed decision. Hence the reason why it's the website, the publicity that will be associated with it as well.
Thank you, Stuart. So just to clarify, we use the term complement the food hygiene ratings scheme and hygiene information scheme, and that's because the Safe to Trade standard and therefore audit seeks to identify matters that would not be identified in a traditional food hygiene rating. So the other side of Helen's question there, Claire, was, the usage of the scheme and the data and the information for regulators, which is, almost an added benefit or a parallel kind of process. So why is that important?
So I think the main thing about the scheme is it's gathering additional intelligence. It's a third-party scheme, approval scheme. It is certificated. We all use these schemes when we're looking at approved premises in terms of BRC grading, etc. And I think it's just about additional information. So if you were going to go and do an inspection at a premises that you knew was in the regulated business group under the coordinated partnership, you would be able to, you could ask them for information on this. You could ask them for a copy of their report. Like, as we do when we go to do an approved premises, you can. It's about providing additional data so that the local authorities can use their resources in a way they feel they need to. And it's one of those things whereby we're all getting a little bit skinny in funding, and therefore it's a way of targeting areas perhaps more. We're not saying that you can't go and inspect, we're not saying don't do that, but just use your resources that's available to you, the information that's there, and say the register will be updated. Officers can contact us to find out what's, the status, etc. We're going to be keeping that register as accurate as possible. And I say it's an annual inspection, so it's also having information fed in there from consumers or anything else that the businesses are very good at going to shield in terms of the issues they have, etc. And so it'll be constantly monitored. So it's as most up to date that we could possibly get, and there will be the opportunity for officers to access information for businesses, and hopefully that'll be really useful when targeting resources.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. We've got a question from Janice Bardwell. Thank you, Janice. Janice wants to know how we've talked about the consistency of the Safe to Trade auditors, but controversially, Janice is asking, how do we trust the local authority inspections of the food hygiene ratings if there's any inconsistency in inspections?
Right. So shall I talk about that? So I think what we have to look at is obviously a local authority when they carry out an inspection, they have a pro forma, they are covering areas enough so that they can actually undertake a score rating. With Safe to Trade, it covers all of the questions. So with the audit, there are 500 plus. I can't remember exactly how many we're up to now, but it's a lot questions, and that covers every single aspect of the 852 plus other issues to do with standards, etc. So I think when we look at food hygiene ratings, obviously if there are issues in terms of a business finding that they disagree with that, obviously they can go to the local authority and have a discussion. I think the information that we're going to be able to provide is purely related to this, not necessarily against what the officer's saying. However, it may be something that the business would be able to utilise in the event of an appeal. So, if they wanted an appeal, a score from a local authority, or if they wanted to re-rate, etc., it might be a tool that the local authority could utilise to help that business. There are obviously FSA consistency exercises that I'm sure officers undertake annually, as we do at Milton Keynes, and I just think that sometimes the score rating may not necessarily reflect what the business has thought during that visit, and obviously we just look at the evidence base from the officer when they've been, so that we can make a query or help a business in terms of communicating with the local authority effectively.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out as well that it is the standard Safe to Trade is independent from the local authority aspect as well, even though there's the kind of the synergistic relationship. It's an independent standard.
Yeah.
I suppose the other bit as well, Kelvin, is that you look at frequency of inspections and whether it's a 6, 12, 18 monthly inspection, but we also know that because of resource constraints, not all businesses are receiving the inspections at the frequency that they normally would have had historically. And so the great thing about the scheme is that because it's on an annual basis, there's the ability to intervene and identify the non-legal requirements and ensure that robust action plans are put in place to improve the standards for consumers, but also provide that reassurance to regulators that those well-intended, well-informed businesses that are part of Safe Trade, they do want to be out there at the forefront of driving that regulatory change.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stuart. We've had an anonymous question. They're usually the best ones. If a business has received a Safe to Trade audit and fulfilled the requirements, can this be used by the authority as an alternate intervention strategy? and used to produce a rating. Can it help? Oh, pardon me. Can it help lift some of the burden on local authorities and their inspection programs? So, fabulous question.
Okay, so shall I start with that one? So currently, as
Yeah.
you know, because of the way that the code is, we cannot negate a food hygiene intervention and inspection as such. Although we do believe that this will help officers in determining their programme, there isn't any reason why they cannot utilise the information that we have to lessen the time on site, to target certain areas on site that will then work together with the information that will be available. To them. And as I say, you can contact the businesses up front and ask for details and information. I'm sure they'll be absolutely cock a hoop, to be quite honest, if they're utilising their safe to trade, the recognition from that, because they have had to work really hard to get onto this and to pass the scheme. So, from our point of view, we think it's something that we can all work together on. There will be outlets for information on the businesses. And I think, as I say, we can't negate an inspection, but you may be able to reduce your burden by having the details and information in advance.
And Claire, I think that probably goes back to what I mentioned earlier with the data that we've got
Yeah.
From Safe to Trade, and obviously very similar to our the question is anonymized data. But what we do know is businesses and what their top conformances as well as non-conformances, and as a either as a regulator or someone who's worked in retail for a number of years. Would I want to go and look at things that I know are going to be compliant on a regular basis, or would I rather go and focus my efforts on areas that are non-compliant? So hence the reason why standards in cleanliness, the pest control, and the labelling and date code, and the three that's coming out, and the quite stark actually difference between the other non-conformances. So that that could easily help a regulator as part of their visit.
And also the information that you've just said there, the data, we're not just talking those who are on Safe to Trade, we're talking about your mass of clients and businesses. So, so the data is quite broad in, to have drilled down on that, onto those three areas. So those may be three areas that people would like to, would want to go and target when they actually go and do a physical inspection.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a question from Sarah Moole. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah's asking, why are members of Safe to Trade not listed on the primary authority page? She's saying sometimes when you're out inspecting, some of the junior members of management in food business operators are a little bit woolly on Safe to Trade and primary authority relationships, so it's difficult for the officer. So do you want to take that one, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure that you will have had the experience of the Primary Authority Register, and when it all changed in 2017, it went back to a basic module, and it's been changed, and it's growing, and it's being amended all the time. And I know that it has complications. There are issues with it. So we are looking at the best way of tackling this. So our current thoughts are that we will be uploading the template for the businesses who are on Safe to Trade, so that you'll be able to look for it. So you'll be able to search for the name of the business, and then and we'll provide the other tool by a list, which we're able to do sort of after over 3 days. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't actually add in a list of names, perhaps on the information, or we could potentially add one into the just in the information section. But you wouldn't be able to search on that, so you'd have to know that they were in the scheme, so to speak. Now, I know that there is going to be a platform for local authorities to be able to sign up to look into, to get hold of information and data. And I know that that's being trialled and looked at the moment. It's being tested internally at Shield, isn't it? And hopefully that there will be a feed to that quite soon, so that you'll be able to utilise that, and you'll be able to look for businesses on that scheme as well. But I think the thing is that businesses need to be, Yes, businesses do need to be clued up, particularly those in coordinated partnerships, that they are part of a primary authority relationship, and that they that is actually in the standard. So it is thrown at them all the time, so that they try and recognise that, and they are able to tell the officer, and therefore you can make use of that. But from personally, I think if local authorities are aware of who are in the scheme ahead of doing an intervention, it just means that they have that opportunity to have additional data and information, so that they can plan their time more effectively.
So we've got a feed to the primary authority register that's been set up and tested at the moment. So, but obviously in the interim, if not to change an officer's process, but you would search the primary authority register, but you could also just search the Safe to Trade register as well, could you not?
Absolutely, and I think that's where we're going to be putting some information and details on the primary authority in the interim, so that when people look and become aware of the scheme, they'll be able to look for the business that they were going to go and do an inspection at. At the moment, some of these areas haven't been finalised in terms of how we can provide that information to local authorities in the best way.
Wonderful. Just checking, I think we have exhausted our questions that we've already got here. So there is still a few more minutes if anyone wants to get anything over. I think we have answered everything, which is probably a first. So well done, Claire. Well done, Stuart. So if that's the case, we may as well wrap up. So Stuart, Claire, thank you again for your time, for joining us
Fine.
today.
No problem.
Thank you
Thank you,
to
Kelvin.
all of our online guests who've joined us today. For anyone who may have joined partway through, who missed the beginning, don't worry, this session is being recorded. It will be hosted on our media platforms, so you can go away and rewatch it at a time that is suitable for you. So join us next month for another Safe to Trade live broadcast and webinar session. And until then, thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.